How many of you are able to set up UiPath? All of you are done? Anyone still pending? I haven't installed UiPath yet.
No, sir. You start.
Were you able to practice what we have done so far?
Yes.
Okay. Now that you are familiar with how the process runs in UiPath, we'll just talk about life cycle a bit today. How the robotics life cycle is. So before we talk about robotics life cycle, we'll talk about solution design life cycle. A lot of you are already familiar with other life cycles. The software development life cycle is kind of similar to how robotics life cycle is present. In software development life cycle, the phases we kind of have are plan, design, build, test, accept, deploy, and finally go live. Right. These are typically the phases present in a software development life cycle. Planning phase is where you do the uh, functionality planning. This is where you receive the business requirement document and functional requirement management. This is where you plan. Design is where you create the necessary documentation, come up with a solution design, and build is where you actually do the development part. Right, and test is SIT. This is where you do your integration or regression testing, and then comes your acceptance, where you do the end user testing, and then finally you deploy or implement your production server. So, and then happens the production pre-production, and then once the warranty period is over, it goes to the go live. So, typical software development life cycle is these are the phases that are present. Right now, if you talk about robotics life cycle, the phases you see here is pretty much the same. Even the robotics life cycle, even in within RPA, you kind of follow the same phases, but what is happening inside these phases is different from software development life cycle. So we will try to explore each phase and see in robotics as part of the process what is happening. So let us first take one at a time. So within the plan phase. So plan phase is where you start planning. You try to plan the timelines, you try to plan the required accesses needed, you try to plan the required resources needed, all that information, all the planning is done in the plan phase. So in the robotics life cycle, the plan phase is where you actually try to filter the processes from the pipeline. So this is where you check whether, so what is robotic, what is RPA? RPA is all about automating manual processes, right? So you can't blindly automate all the processes. Only certain processes can be automated. The reason because some of the processes cannot be automated, maybe they are too complex or maybe it is not possible to automate, and certain processes are not worth automating. Means you won't get much profit by automating it. They are of same effort even if you're doing it manually, or they are of same effort even you are automating it. There is no point of automating them, right? So you need to look at this process and try to ask two questions against this process. The first question you would ask is it worth automating this process? The second question you should ask is, can you automate this process? Is it possible? So is it worth automating this process? Can you automate this process? Now, how do you decide, on what basis do you decide the answers for these two questions? So we have certain formulas that we apply, which kind of tell you, which kind of suggest you the answers to these two questions. So for answering your first question, is it worth automating the process? We have something called as FTE saves. So this is a question that is asked at least in three-fourths of the interview. Out of every four interviews, minimum three interviews ask this question. What is FTE save for your process? How do you calculate the FTE saves? I have this process. They'll explain your scenario and they'll tell you to calculate the FTE save. Okay. So what are FTE saves is full-time effort save. Okay. So full-time effort save is nothing but the total manual effort by one employee working hour for the same duration. The total manual effort of the project or of the process divided by one employee working hours. So let us take some small examples to see how FTE save can be calculated. So let us say there is a person coming to office daily. He spends 8 hours of his working time in office. Okay, daily he comes and he spends 8 hours of his working time in office, and daily out of those 8 hours, 4 hours is spending on a process. Daily morning 8 o'clock he'll come and he will probably leave by 3 o'clock, 8 hours, and in that 8 hours, 4 hours is spending in a process, and you automated that process. Now, what is the FTE save? Can someone tell me? What is the total effort in that per day? How much is he spending? 4 hours divided by the one employee working hour information. How much is spending per day? How many hours is actually working in office? 8. So the FTE save here is 0.5. Clear on this?
James, one question.
Can you ask again?
So one question. Yeah. So how will come to know the total efforts of the process?
Can you repeat? Your voice is breaking.
So how will you come to know the total efforts of the process actually?
The total of the process will be shared by the business. So they are doing it manually daily, right? That's what you're planning to automate. So they will tell you, hey, our team is doing this around 2 hours per day. The same work I want you to automate. Our team is spending around 1 week per month. I want you to automate. So they are the ones who give you this effort information. So out of that, you will start calculating the FTE saves. Clear?
Okay, okay, okay.
All right. So if we take another scenario, there are two employees working on alternate days. Means every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, two employees are working. Throughout the day, they are spending some work, spending on that process. Okay, so full Monday, full Wednesday, and full Friday, all the 8 hours they are spending on that process. But you automated it, and what is the FT save? Simple. So two employees are working on it. So two into how many days they are working per week? 3 days. How many hours for each day? 8 hours. Divided by, for the same 1 week duration, what is one employee's working hour? 5 days. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We are spending 5 days into 8 hours. So answer is 6/5. FTC. Clear?
Yeah, got.
Yeah. So this is how you calculate your FT save. Now, how do you determine the worth of the process? Okay, now you are able to calculate the FT save, but how do you determine whether this process is worth or not? How do you determine this? If one RPA developer is spending 1 month automating a process, then the minimum FTE of that process should be 0.7. So if one RPA developer is spending 1 month automating a process, then the minimum FTE of that process should be 0.7. So ideally, let us say that in your resume, you have specified 6 months your project duration is, and you specified your team size as 5. So what should be the minimum FTE of that process to be actually? So five people, five RPA developers spent 6 months. So into 0.7. So 30 into that's somewhere around 21 FTE saves. Minimum FTE should be 21. Clear? Any question, guys, on this?
No question.
All right. So this is how you will be able to calculate. First, you need to calculate the FT saves. Next, you need to calculate the total development effort that is happening for automating it. And next, you will see whether the numbers are matching, whether you can, there is actually a profit involved. Because even though you are able to save something by automating it, you are investing some kind of amount for the development of RP development. So that's the reason why you need to see the profit or ROI, return of investment, for this process. Next comes the possibility of automating this process, whether this process can actually be automated or not. What does it exactly mean? Are there processes, that means, are there processes that cannot be automated? In what situations you cannot automate a process? Okay, so it's all about the application compatibility. So there are certain factors that come into picture. So that is application compatibility, data handover between applications, and the kind of decisions that are involved. And these are the three main factors that pretty much anyone looking whether they do something called as a technical feasibility. Okay, technical feasibility, where they see is if this process is technically feasible, whether this process can actually technically automated. So what do you mean by application compatibility is what are the underlying applications of that process, whether those applications can actually be interacted with UiPath or not. If you remember, I said UiPath can automate Windows-based application, web-based application. It can automate email. It can automate Excel. It can automate PDF. It can automate browsers like Internet Explorer, Chrome, right? It can automate Citrix-based application, mainframe applications, SAP application. But there are certain things it cannot automate as well. It cannot automate Java based applications. If I remember you telling that it cannot automate Java, jab.jar.jab, it cannot automate .swf applications. It cannot automate .msi applications, sandbox applications. So there are certain restrictions on what kind of applications your path or pretty much any RPA tool can or cannot automate. So you need to see what are the underlying applications present and how much of them are compatible with UiPath. Okay. Next, data handover between applications. What kind of data is getting processed? So whatever it is, data entry or data pull or whatever data we are trying to process using a path, we need to see what kind of data it is. Is it a free text or is it a pattern, a structured data? Is it a structured data or unstructured data? Okay. So what does it exactly mean is, recently we got a process where we have two different Excel files where we need to cross compare and check. Okay, so we go column by column. So there is a column where address is present in both the Excel files. So we need to see whether the address is a match or not. If the address is a match, we proceed forward. If the address is not, each row we go row by row. If address is not a match, we will mark that with that. I will highlight that particular cell with a hello, and then we don't feed that into the application. Move on to the next row. The problem is that address field is a manually written one. So there will be two people writing into two different Excel files. So when two humans are writing, the way they write it will be different. Okay, suppose if you take Hanuman Park 1266 door number, the other one person will write is Hanuman PARK 1266 DOR. The other person will write Hanuman PK 1266 DR. As a human, I know even though someone written Spark as PK in one and writes Spark as other, the address is matching because I'll have enough cognitive thinking to see the differences and try to understand, okay, it's a match. But UiPath, you can only give variable A is equal to variable B. There is no such thing as approximate match. So that in that particular scenario, the match will be a false. The flagged as false, and then moves on. Not just that. So someone can write first the door number and the house number. In some people will write first the house number and the door number. So there will be multiple combinations of the way you are writing the address. It cannot like from letter to letter. There is no way that things will match when two persons are writing the same address. Got it? So these kind of free text, it cannot parse. It cannot process. So what kind of data are we processing within an application, or what kind of data we are processing within a part of the process? Whether that can be automatable or not, we see. Third is what kind of decisions are there? Binary decisions? Means is it a simple true or false? Are there complex decisions involved? So complex decisions are something like if this is equal to this, then so more than a simple, see, binary is all about true or false. If it is this, do this. If this, do that. Like if else, we have. So complexization survey where there will be more than one kind of conditions involved, and that is hard to code that into your path. Complex decisions. And fourth one, I kind of missed, which is accesses. What kind of accesses are required? See, each application will have its own access, be it LDAP access or single sign-on or enterprise access. Different kind of accesses will have. Not all accesses can be provided to the bot. Maybe because it can have PI information, highly sensitive information, or the process could have high criticality. Right. So if the process is high criticality, the process should not be automated. No. Why is a process should not be automated if it has high criticality? Is because Let us say an example. Daily I'm doing a process. I spend around 1 hour of it. Okay. Suddenly one day there is a small issue in the input file I got. Now what would I do? Immediately I'll reach the upstream team, try to understand why there is an issue in the input file, and then if there is actually a change, I'll adapt myself to that particular change immediately, and then I'll finish that process. Probably since I am daily doing the process, I already have a grip on the process. So I have the control on what I am doing, so I can immediately adapt to the new environment and probably take an hour or two to finish my work. It may take extra 1 hour or two because there is a change in the input file. So I have to change the way I'm working on that file. Now let us say that after 6 months,
Jayant, your voice is breaking. Jayant, your voice is breaking actually.
yeah, I think there is an internet connectivity issue with your end as well because I see your voice is also breaking.
Yeah, now it's clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
So where was I? Yeah. So
That's
the
great.
process changed after 6 months. Suddenly the process got automated, and you have deployed that into the code, into the production. It's running fine for a while. After a month or two, again there is a change in the process. Now, what is the kind of protocol you need to follow? First thing is you don't have the grip on the process because instead of you, the UiPath is doing it daily. So first you try to recognize what is the change. You try to recognize what is the code that need to be built or that need to be fixed against the new change. You make those changes in the code. You perform the testing again in that. You again take the UIT sign off from the end user. You create a change request. You deploy that code again into the production, and which takes somewhere at least 2 to 3 days. What took around 1 or 2 hours before, now at least takes minimum 24 hours to 48 hours because you go again through this series set of protocols, which kind of delayed your business as usual BAU. Let us say the process criticality is very high. If you did not finish that particular process within 1 or 2 hours, you are going to have a financial impact to the business. Now, the kind of loss you incurred while you are doing it manually is nothing compared to what you did when you automated it. So, if the criticality of the process is very high, if the SLA of the process is very low, if the SLA gets breached in very less time, I would be against automating that process because if any changes are going to happen in the future, those would take lot of time for your ear path to get adopted to, unlike how a human does. So pretty much, so this is criticality. And finally, we also see the stability of the process. What do you exactly mean by stability of the processes? See, if the process steps keep changing very often, then it is not recommended to automate that process. Let us say you got some process to automate it, you got manually, and you started automating it. In the middle of the development, they say, hey, the input file got changed. Please change your code because the format of the input got changed. So you'll make changes, you'll push it to production. Again, some other steps got changed. So if the process repetitively keeps changing, the steps repetitively keep changing, then it is not recommended to automate the process because you are unnecessarily spending effort to make changes to your code accordingly as well. The process should be stable at least for the next 2 years. There should not be any change in how the process is done. As a human, you can adopt it, but as a part of the code, you need to keep make changes in the code, and then you need to keep testing it every time there are changes. There's a lot of unnecessary effort, development effort is getting wasted there. Okay, the stability of the process, the criticality of the process, the kind of access is required as part of the process, the kind of decisions you are making as part of the process, the kind of data you are trying to process, and finally the underlying applications present as part of the process. So these are the factors that affect to see whether you can automate the process or not. Similarly, the above, Is it worthy or not? What are the factors that, even though we calculated the FT save and all, what actually the factors that impacted that are the total manual effort of the process. The higher the manual effort is, the higher the FT is safe. So you'll have higher the chances, and also the frequency of the process. The higher the frequency, see, is it better to automate a process which runs daily, or is it better to automate a process which runs annually? It is better to automate a process which runs daily, because by automating that you're saving a lot of daily effort. If it is an annual, it's running yearly only once. What is the difference if a human is doing it or a bot is doing it? Because yearly only once doesn't mean you're saving much by automating it. Clear? The frequency and the total manual effort are the factors that define whether you need to automate that or not. So any questions so far in the planning phase? So these are
No,
the questions that they asked multiple times over and over again in interview. 30% of the questions they ask on here itself. Because irrespective of what tool it is, one should have these analytical skills to understand whether a process should get automated or not. Give me a minute, guys. So once the planning phase is over, then we get that. So during the planning phase only, we get the document called as business requirement document. So business requirement document is where you contain all the manual steps, part of the steps that they are doing manually. Okay, so going through the process, then only you'll understand what are the underlying applications, what are the kind of data you're processing, and so forth. If let us say the process has filtered through these two questions, it went to the next phase. So post the plan phase that we get something called as design phase. And design phase is where you create the solution design, how you're planning to automate the process. And you also create some kind of documents called as solution design document and process definition document. Simply they are called as PDD and SDD. So again, these are the important documents that you create as part of the process within RPA. And these are the questions that kind of ask you morely on PDD and SDD as well. What kind of documents did you create as part of the process? What are the components present in a SDD document? When do you create a solution design document? What is the process? Which phase do you create that SDD? Who provides a sign off for the solution design? So these are the kind of questions they ask you as part of the interview. So let us try to understand what is a PDD and what is an SDD. So PDD stands for process definition document. And as it stands for solution design document. So what are these exactly contain? These two. See, you receive a document from the business called as business requirement document, a BRD, or FRM, functional requirement management document, SOP, standard operating procedure. They have different names, but pretty much all these three documents are same. Either it's a BRD or SOP or a FRM. Pretty much a functional requirement, business requirement, a standard operating procedure. Pretty much everything is same. Anyways, so this document contains the manual steps what they are doing it daily. The manual steps of the process. From a functionality perspective, they would be not from a technical perspective. From the functionality perspective. So, if we give an example, they'll say we get So this is a retail client, and we get due amounts of each vendor daily. So we try to process these vendor amounts, and once we get the due date information, we get the aging reports generated. These aging reports information will be sent to the higher authorities. So it tries to be as functionality as possible, less technical and more functional, right? So you try to understand the process. You try to look at the process from a technical perspective. What are they actually doing? What kind of applications they are actually doing? What kind of format of the data are they processing with? So you try to understand the process technically, and you try to write down the technical information of the process that is present in the process definition document. Process definition document is where you are trying to write the technical aspects of the process. In the sense, you write the as is process, means the steps that are followed as it is, but from a technical point of view. So in the sense, they'll say that I'm getting agent reports in a shared drive. It's present, that is a step that is present in the BRD. Instead of saying agent reports in process definition document, you'll write, you will tell you got 3 Excel reports of XLSX format coming in a shared drive. These XLSX format contain pivot tables, charts, and structured data. Okay, so next, once the aging reports are retrieved, we perform a VLOOKUP to find the differences between two different files. So in technical report, what you'll write is you'll do a VLOOKUP against these two columns. Whatever output is coming, you are doing a small match check. If the match check is, we are applying a filter on there where the match check is negative. So a simple functionality word is you are trying to find the differences between two files. But what exactly do you mean by that? How do you find different differences between two files? You to perform a VLOOKUP, and then you try to find the differences between these two columns. So you try to write it as technically as possible in the as is process. How they are doing it manually from a technical aspect. And next, what are the accesses required as part of the process? What are the target systems? Target systems means any Excel files you are using. If you are using shared drive, if you are using SharePoint, if you are using any emails for sending and receiving, if you are using any applications, if you any environment or system environments you are using, if any specific system requirements are required, like minimum 12 GB RAM is required. So all these are part of the target system. So what are the system or application requirements for this process to do? You got a fresh OS installed, and you want to do a process. First thing you'll ask is what are the applications to be installed to do that process. Second thing is what are the accesses do I need to do this process. Third thing is what are the system requirements I need to have to do this work. These are the three major concerns you would have if you're getting assigned to a new work. Which applications do I need to install? Which accesses do I need to have? What are the system requirements? So all that will be part of your target systems and access requirements. Okay. Next, you also talk about the SLA of the process. What is the minimum SLA for this process to finish so that it did not impact the BAU, it will not impact the finance or a reputational risk to the business. Next, the process owner information. Who is the current process owner for this, and the escalation matrix. If the process has not finished in time, how the escalation, to whom the escalation has to be raised. The matrix is something like the hierarchy. If this guy did not respond, next you'll escalate to the higher level. If that guy also did not respond, next you'll escalate to the next higher level. So the escalation hierarchy you would fill in the process definition document as well. So everything written, explaining the process, you're defining the process. That is what process definition document is. If someone wants to know about what the process is about, he has to get into this PDD, open it, and he has to read this one. So everything related to the process you write in the PDD, process definition document. And then comes the solution design document. Solution design document is where you try to come up with a solution that is required to automate the process. What are the steps you are going to automate and how are you going to automate it? In here we create something called as to be process. So in process definition document you have as is process. In solution design document you have to be process. Means what are the steps you are planning to follow while you are automating it. A simple task could be something like what is the high difference? What is the main difference between as is process and to be processes? When manually you're doing it, let us say that you have some data that you need to process from the shared drive. You open the Excel file directly in the shared drive, you copy the data, you paste it into the another Excel file. That is what you do manually. Let us say that you have some data entry where you need to enter this data into an Windows application. You open that Excel file, you copy each row or you look at each row, you start typing into the Windows application. All right. If you take this only for example that we have done recently, I had a file called report. Now, how do I do it manually that we have automated in the previous class? I open this Excel file. I open any teller application. I look at each row and I start filling. I look at the first row. Okay, the amount is 500. Credit type is cash. So I look at that row and then so credit type is cash. So I choose cash. Amount is 500. So it's a positive. So I keep typing it. And I click on accept button. So whatever value I'm getting, I look at this and then I start typing it again. So that is a manual process. That is the steps you're writing. Step 1, open Excel file. Step 2, read through the first row. Step 3, feed that information into the application. Step 4, read the next row, fill into the application. Step 5, keep reading until you run out of rows. Step 6, close an Excel file. Step 7, close the Windows application. These are the manual steps. These are the as is process. Now, what is the to be process? Solution design document. First, what did you? Step 1, read that Excel file, store the data into a data table. This is what we have done. Step 2, iterate through each row in the data table, get each field value by using get row item. Step 3, write that feed that each row, open the application, any application. Step 5, feed each cell value into the cache or withdrawal by performing the if else condition. Step 6, get the transaction information. Step 7, if the amount is negative and if it is cash, feed the transaction as NA and feed the status as failure. Step 7, close the Windows application. Step 8, save and close the Excel file. If you remember, what I have done manually is different from how the UiPath is doing it. The steps it's following is different. How do we send an email? We open the Outlook, we click on the new button, we fill in the text boxes to CC, send, we click on the send button. But in UiPath, the way you send an email is via simple action. We have a send email action, so you need to just type subject and body and it will automatically send. So even though manually or via UiPath you are doing the same actions, how you are performing is different. So that is the reason why your to be process is different from your as is process. As is process is how a human is doing it currently. To be process is how is your path going to do it going forward. As a human, I might be only working for 8 hours per day. Let us say it's a huge process with a high volume. Daily, I come, I do 50 records in my 8 hours. I'll finish tomorrow. I'll come and I'll do another 50 records. But if your path is doing it, I expect it to run 24/7. Why it's not a human. It doesn't require a break, right? So it keeps running 24/7, and I can deploy the same code in two different machines, and I can run them parallelly. So two machines parallelly they'll be running 24/7. I can take a replica of that code, right? So how they are performing, how faster they are performing, it also varies from human to a tool. So that is a to be process difference between an as is process. And also we also specify what kind of exception handling we are doing. So once the to be process is structured, once you create the process flow of how we are planning to do your path, then you specify what kind of exceptions you are handling. Authentication exception, launch exception, invalid format exception, input file not found exception. So what kind of exceptions are you handling as part of the process? Okay. So server connectivity exception, all those exceptions to be specified. You also need to specify the scheduling, how you are planning to schedule. What is the schedule frequency of your process? I said right, once you automate your code, you need to go to orchestrator and start scheduling it. You want to run it daily, you want to run it weekly, you want to keep it ongoing 24/7. How are you planning to schedule that? Okay. You also need to specify if there are any share drive or SharePoint paths are part of the process. You also need to specify. We are not come to this, but IMAP, SMTP, protocol information also to be specified. This is for sending and receiving emails. We'll talk about it in our next classes, not to worry. So everything regarding the solution, your solution you will be specifying here as part of the process. In which production servers will it be planning to run? In which production server will it run daily? In which development server have you built it? So all this information you will be specified in the solution design document. So this is a PDD. These are the components you'll have in a process definition document, and these are the components you'll have in a solution design document. We also have something called as current state process flow in here. We'll talk about this one of the days. What is a current state process flow? And here we have future state process flow. So same to be process is like you're writing in steps. Process flow is something like you're drawing a flow chart in Visual Studio. So one of these classes I'll open the Visual Studio and to Visual Standard, and then I'll actually show you how a process flow can be created. It is nothing but a flow chart explaining your process. Any questions so far? This is what is part of the design phase. Once to create the process definition document, ideally process definition document is not created by the developer. It is between the business analyst and the business. The analyst and the business. If analyst is not present within your company, usually developer and business sit together and create the PDD. And solution design document is between the analyst and the developer, because developer is one who comes up with the solution, and then he starts feeding in how the process should be automated. So once the solution design document has been created, he sends it over to the business. Businesses will review. They will validate. Okay, the solution you have come up with looks fine. I think you can start coding against it. So once they sign off on the solution design document, then we move on to the development phase.
This is future state flow, current state flow.
You can repeat. You're talking about process flow.
Future state, current state. What is this?
Yes, yes. So see the same thing as as this process, like you're writing what is happening, right? You have written an as is process. Now whatever you've written, you need to create a process flow explaining. You need to create a flowchart explaining what is happening. So Visual Standard is a tool where someone creates a flowchart of the same steps. That is what current state is. What manually they're doing, the flowchart is called current state process flow, and whatever you're planning to do, that flowchart is a future state process flow. Clear?
Got it. Got it.
Okay. All right, guys. So first two phases we have covered successfully. So tomorrow we'll be looking at the next three phases: the development phase, the acceptance testing, and the pre-production go live. What kind of change request we will be creating? What are the kind of approvals we need? So the test scenarios that we usually go through, the scripts, all that we'll be covering in tomorrow's class. Clear?
Okay, Jay.
All right, guys. Let's catch up in tomorrow's class.
Thank you.
SDD and technical design document both are same or both are different?
Technical design document is a kind of a different one. Solution design document is more of explaining the solution of it. Technical is more of explaining the code that you have written. So solution design document is intended for the business. Technical design document is intended for the support you are handing over your code to. So we will come to the technical design document is something that you create after the development phase, where you will hand it over to the support team, because they are the ones who are going to support in future, right? So TDD is a different document. It's also called as bot management document. Some people call this as technical design document, but it's a different one.
So
Okay.
we will create TDD as well, right? In this
Exactly. Yeah, I'll be sharing these templates with you as well. I'll be sharing with one of my old project that has been scrapped. Those documents I'll be sharing you. So I have this STD document, TD document, which will actually give you an insight of how these documents actually look like. Clear?
Okay.
Tomorrow's class I'll be sharing you the documents.
One more is like ODI, PDI documents is like only in Blue Prism or
Only in Blue Prism. Object interface and then process interface, because we have process studio and object studio in Blue Prism only, not in UiPath. That is the reason I didn't cover those two in this. Usually in Blue Prism SDLC I cover that for Blue Prism batch. OD and PD are Blue Prism exclusive. Okay. So they have objects and processes, two parallel environments, unlike in UiPath. Alright guys, then let's catch up in tomorrow's class. So if anyone haven't installed the UiPath or setup yet, just reach out to me. I'll probably help them. Okay.
Okay, thanks.